Hey everybody, this is TJR. Growing up as a kid, and long before I was a huge music fan, I was a huge comic book fan, and I still am to this day. And growing up through my teenage years into my 20s and even into my 30s, I never thought that I would see the day when comic book movies would be taken seriously as a legitimate form of storytelling, and that there would be so many of them, and that there would be so many comic book superhero based TV shows as well. So many of them there are that I can't even keep up with them all, but I do try to sample them from time to time. And this brings me to the first 4 episodes of Stargirl, which I've watched over the last couple weeks. Stargirl, in case you're not familiar, is a DC Universe original series, but it is also available on the CW network. It's based on the DC comic book entitled Stars and Stripe, which is written by Jeff Johns, who also serves as one of the show's executive producers and series writers. Also, I never thought I'd see the day when comic book creators would be given the chance to be executive producers on a TV show based on the comic series that they helped to create. Now, I have to admit, I might not have felt any real strong motivation to see this series until I saw the trailer. The trailer was really fun, but mostly I was surprised to see how much it was integrating the Justice Society of America, which is the original Golden Age superhero team from the 1940s. As far as I can tell, this was the first superhero team. This was the team where DC Comics' other comic book superheroes teamed up together. It was the predecessor to the Justice League and the Avengers. And the Justice Society's adventures ran through the pages of All-Star Comics throughout the 1940s. And I love Golden Age comics, and I love stories about the Justice Society of America. Now, of course, I knew they weren't going to be the focus. I knew that it was the backstory for this character whose name is Courtney Whitmore, who becomes Stargirl. I've read a couple issues of the actual comic that it's based on entitled Stars and Stripe, and I've seen this character portrayed in animation, such as in the Justice League animated series from some years back. So I watched the first episode, and I have to admit, it did not sit well with me. Now, it opened up with a nice backstory sequence that involved how the Justice Society was defeated by the Injustice Society at some past time period. They're kind of vague on it because the Justice Society is from the 1940s, yet this is set in the present day, so that means this couldn't have been that long ago since our character is a teenager, our main character is a teenager in the present day in this series. Yet when this character learns about the Justice Society and learns about the fact that they had a group of arch rivals called the Injustice Society of America, her reaction is, who thinks up these names? And her stepfather, which I'll get to in a moment, explains to her that it was a different time then. Well, it wasn't that long ago if you're looking at the timeline of the series, but whatever. I'm just going to go with it. So what bothered me about this first episode, the show opens with our main character adjusting to a new life with a new stepfather, Pat Dugan, played by Luke Wilson, who she will find out has a superhero past and a past with the Justice Society of America. She's also adjusting to a new brother and also a new life in a new town, a small town where she doesn't know anybody. A good portion of the first half of the series, or at least it felt like a good portion of the first half of the series, deals with her going to school and basically not fitting in. And this is where the show throws at you some of the most cringe-worthy stereotypes that I can imagine having to have to sit through in anything, a TV show, a movie. I had the same complaint about the movie Shazam. As much as I liked that movie, the sequences in high school with the bullies were just so ridiculously cringeworthy to where you're like, oh, please let this end. And man, those sequences, the high school sequences, just had me, face palming, just going, oh God, please, this is awful. There are good ways and there are bad ways to portray what is oftentimes the painfulness, the isolation, the loneliness of going to high school when you don't fit in. And this show chose the most cringeworthy way to portray that, in my opinion. It was really hard to get past that with the rest of the episode. However, the one thing that it did get, I thought, right, and it did it really well, was near the tail end of the show when our main character, Courtney Whitmore, starts to come in contact with the cosmic staff that will basically be the source of, I don't want to say her superpowers because she doesn't really have superpowers, but the staff provides her with a form of, it's basically like, like if you know Green Lantern, it's like his ring. Green Lantern himself has no superpowers, but he has this ring that he can command and do things with. Kind of the same thing with the staff. And her learning how to use this, her becoming aware of it. And also in the first episode near the end, she has a confrontation with one of the Justice, or rather I should say, the Injustice Society's villains, Brainwave. And this sequence, this confrontation is really well done. Her not being ready for this, her barely knowing how to use the powers of the cosmic staff, the Brainwave character is portrayed in a very menacing fashion to where you really feel there are some stakes and that she could die at any second. And her terror, her just trying to make it out with her life. This was really well done, in my opinion. And the action, the superhero action, is really well portrayed. And I remember at that moment I went, wow, suddenly it's good, So I wasn't real pleased with this first episode. I went onto YouTube to hear what the rest of the YouTube community had to say about it. And surprisingly, this first episode got really strong reviews, positive reviews. And I thought to myself, did I watch the same show? Now, I didn't go back and rewatch it. Instead, I just moved forward. I watched the second episode, which was by far leaps and bounds beyond that first episode. One of the most fascinating things about this second episode is that we find out what has happened to the Injustice Society since they defeated the Justice Society in the opening of the first episode. And we find out now that they're all solid pillars of their community. They are doctors, they are councilmen, they all have important positions. This is quite interesting. They have families, and they are working together covertly on something that they're referring to as Project New America. And I found this to be really fascinating, that these supervillains of yesterday have realized that the old way of trying to take over is ineffective. The best way to take over is to become part of the system, become part of the establishment. And I actually really liked this aspect of the show. And I like this rather subversive aspect of this show because, while this is not a CW show per se, it's on the CW where they have all these DC superhero shows. I like the fact that this show, which is kind of to a certain extent appealing to teenagers more so than I think some of the other CW shows, it's a much more family-friendly show, yet it's got this very, as far as I can tell at this point, maybe I'll be proven wrong as the series progresses, but what feels like a very subversive element, which is saying that sometimes the bad guys are part of the establishment. And in a later episode, our main character says that to her stepfather, Pat Dugan. What if the establishment are the bad guys? Now, I know that's nothing new within, superhero comics and in a lot of storytelling, but I think it's different for a show like this, considering, the other TV shows that you see on the CW that are like this, and also just the fact that this truly is geared, I think, for still a younger audience than the average CW show. Or I should say is inclusive to that younger audience in a way that maybe other CW shows aren't. As the series progresses, Courtney and her stepfather begin to do undercover work, and they start to try to find out, where is the rest of the Injustice Society? Where are they hiding? What are they doing? And we get to start to unravel this kind of conspiratorial mystery, which has one of the darker moments at the ending of episode 4. In fact, one of the show's darkest moments so far. In the way that that episode ends up, I don't want to give away too much here. Also along the way, Pat Dugan, her stepfather, takes Courtney to the now closed up and abandoned Justice Society headquarters, where she realizes that we're going to need to form a new Justice Society to combat this injustice gang that is working covertly behind the scenes. I should also add that in the second episode, Courtney and her stepfather, Pat, have another confrontation together with Brainwave, and they win. In fact, they put Brainwave in the hospital. And this bit of news starts to bring the other Injustice Gang members out of the closet, so to speak. I have to stop here and say that I really like how the bad guys in this show are being portrayed. There's something really unsettling about the fact that you've got all of these supervillains living very normal, upper-class lives with families, raising kids, some of them really loving their kids. And it's quite unsettling to know that they've had these dark pasts behind them, and that they might be planning something also equally dark for the future. By the end of the fourth episode, our main character recruits her first new JSA member, and it's Wildcat. Wildcat was originally a 1940s superhero character, Ted Grant, a championship boxer who puts on a costume and starts fighting crime, because back in the 1940s, that's really all you needed to do half the time. You didn't need to necessarily have superpowers or wild cosmic gadgets. You just had to know how to put up your dukes and fight. Now, this version of Wildcat is the Yolanda Montez version that was created in the 1980s Crisis on Infinite Earth series. And of course, there's going to be more Justice Society new recruits as the series progresses. And I understand we are going to find out that not all of the members of the original Justice Society were, I guess, killed off in the opening episode 1 battle that we see where they're defeated. Apparently we will get some older members coming out of retirement. I'm looking forward to seeing that. Potentially it might be Green Lantern or Dr. Fate, maybe both, I don't know. But either way, I'm looking forward to seeing that. Now, as the show has progressed, I have to keep saying one of the things that it is doing right is, first of all, the way it's building the character dynamics between all the characters, both the good guys, the bad guys, the sons and daughters of the bad guys especially. I can already see where they're going to be playing more important roles as the show progresses. Also, it keeps doing the superhero action right. It's doing a really good job of this. Now, is this the best superhero TV show I've ever seen? I don't want to say the best, but probably one of the most fun, in my opinion. What I really have enjoyed about this show is that, our main character is a teenager, and the other superhero recruits that she's going to find are going to be teenagers too. We can already see that happening. But what I've enjoyed about this show is that when I was a teenager, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a superhero. If you were a comic book fan, who didn't? Every kid wants to be a superhero at some point. And I really felt that this show does a good job of, at least for me, making me feel like I'm a young teenager again and like I could become a superhero. And to me, that's just fun. It's completely unrealistic. It's completely impossible. But it's fun that this show can turn off that logic center of my brain and just let me enjoy this ride. It doesn't have to be the greatest show in the world to accomplish that. And I'm not saying it's a bad show. True, I was a bit turned off by the first episode, but since then this show has been improving, and it's showing signs that some of the story elements, the plot arcs, could really go to some interesting places. So once again, keeping my fingers crossed that that will happen. Hopefully I will not be disappointed. But yeah, this show really does tap into that inner 13-year-old, 14-year-old that wishes they could be a superhero. And I think it taps into it really well. I don't know how well it's going to ever portray high school, but it is tapping into this other aspect. And That is making it a fun and enjoyable show for me. Another thing that I want to mention about this show is its use of music. You know, I was going to stick that in there somewhere. This show does a good job of choosing what music to use. Now, I'm not talking about the orchestral soundtrack. I'm talking about the use of popular songs, or oftentimes not so popular songs, but really good song choices. True, there are some well-known songs that I'm sure everybody recognizes and knows, but equally there are lots of really good songs by artists that you're probably not familiar with, but when you hear them, you're probably going to say, hey, that sounds pretty damn cool. Who is that? And I appreciate that about the show, that it's willing to go beyond established hits, and it's going to look for really good music that is effective to the scene that we're watching. So yeah, kudos on the music direction, kudos on the song choices for this show. In fact, I should also say that as far as choices of music, the same holds true for another DC Universe show which I've begun to watch, and that's Titans. That show has been out for a couple years now, the first 2 seasons, but I'm finally getting to it right now. Once I finish the 2nd season, I think I'm going to talk about that show on this channel. I think I have some interesting things to say about it, especially in light of the fact that this show, Titans, has received a lot of very negative criticism on the internet. I have some interesting things to say about that. So yeah, STARGIRL is definitely working for me. It's definitely providing a little bright spot of fun during a time when things do seem to be very bleak. I know this show probably didn't intend to be that. It could not have anticipated the times that we're currently in, but it's definitely appreciated. Those are my thoughts. Have you watched this show? What were your thoughts? I'm curious to know. Please leave a comment. As always, if you like what I'm doing, be sure to click like, click subscribe, and smash the bell notification icon so you can know when I release new videos. Everybody, thanks for watching. I hope you all stay safe and healthy. Bye-bye.